Hello and welcome back. Today we will be going more into detail considering a turbo build. We will go through all the parameters you can adjust on a turbo engine, and to portray the potential and the process in more detail we will be going for a more aggressive sort of a sports car style build. But so as to be able to compare to a certain baseline, we will start with the engine from our previous video, which is a 1980 4-cylinder 2-valve engine running a carbureted turbo setup. The first thing we will do is we will clone this engine, and now in order to make things a little bit more challenging, we will set for us a goal of 200 horsepower. It makes things easier if you realize that an engine is actually simply an air pump. It has to flow more air through it to be able to make more power, and of course then add the necessary extra fuel so that we will retain a healthy fuel mixture. And the final point is of course that the engine doesn't blow up, that is actually reliable with the added power. Now every engine you build will always consider the cam profile when it comes to whether you're choosing an economy build or a performance build or something in between. So even turbo engines will need to look at the cam profiles, but the good thing with the turbo system is that a turbo engine is less reliant on pure cam profiles for making power, because the turbo can force more air into the engine than can be put there by a simple natural aspiration, and that gives us better efficiency potential with turbos. Okay, so the next thing we will consider is the turbo sizing. Many people on internet forums and wherever, they simply think in terms of boost pressure. But the boost pressure as a relevant metric when comparing different engines is actually not useful at all, because what really matters is the airflow through the turbo system, and you can either affect that by turbo sizing or by boost pressure or both. So what really matters is the actual airflow, and boost alone only can give us hints about that if we are comparing two cars with the exact same turbo and the exact same engine. Okay, so once again, cam profile and turbo sizing, and then once we start talking boost pressure, which is a useful thing, is we need headroom for being able to run more boost to make more power. And then we start looking at compression ratio, and we start looking at ignition timing and fuel mixture. Now, starting with the compression ratio, on a naturally aspirated engine higher makes more power, but on a turbo engine a lower compression ratio allows you to run more boost, which will make more power than compression ratio alone. But you will always want to be optimizing stuff. You can go like crazy low on compression and run just insane boost pressures. You will be making power, but the engine will not be very drivable, and it will obviously not be very efficient at all. Usually when you are going for large horsepower gains like we are talking about right now, is you will need to combine slightly reduced compression ratio, slightly more aggressive cam profiles, larger turbochargers, and more boost. So the last thing about fueling and ignition was that there are things that you can make adjustments to in order to be able to run more boost pressure, and one thing is fuel mixture. Richer mixtures will support higher boost pressure levels, and less advanced ignitions will do the same. They will allow you to run more boost pressure, but each comes with the added side setback. We enrich on the fuel mixture, and we will start losing economy quite quickly indeed. And the ignition timing is something that you need to optimize. If you go too far retarded, then you will get bad efficiency and you will also lose performance. Okay, so our goal is to make 200 horsepower and not change the engine design. So that way we will see that we are achieving the goals simply by tuning and optimizing the engine. Okay, first thing we do is we will go a lot lower on compression ratio. The next thing is we will do what that allows us to do, is to run more boost pressure. And we will find the limit for it right there. Once the engine starts knocking, that's when we need to back off. Okay, so everything else the same. We lowered compression ratio and added a little bit of boost. We are making 9 more horsepower. Okay, so the next thing is we will look at the cam profile, which is actually for a performance engine very conservative indeed right now. The problem is if we go really high on this really sporty cam profile, we will lose a lot of economy. So we will look at what happens with the actual power curve once we start going more aggressive, and we will find a sort of a point where we don't sacrifice too much of our low down responsiveness and torque. Okay, let's see. We will drop it to 52 now, and then we will see what else we can do. But now one thing we already know from the previous videos is once we start going with more aggressive cam profile, our peak power RPM gets pushed more up forward to the top of the rev range, and now we actually have to give us a little bit more breathing room at the top end so that we don't cut off exactly at the peak power, which would be bad for acceleration. Okay, so the next thing is we will see now, once we've done different adjustments in the other respects, is our ignition timing optimized, and how much so. We can actually now, on a normally aspirated engine, we would be making more power by advancing ignition, but now what we are trying to find is a point where efficiency is still very good, but we are as retarded as possible in the ignition time, because that again allows us to run more boost pressure. Okay, so here we are now. This is not an optimal setup. We are simply trying to find the limit that this engine build, this configuration, with what kind of boost pressures it can withstand. And now, as you may guess, the next thing we will be looking at is to adjust the turbo sizing. We will start with the compression, and we will pay close attention to what happens in the power graph. And we can reach reasonable gains, but then once we start pumping it too far up, we will start pushing the torque curve further up the rev range, and what that does is the larger compressor will make the boost threshold RPM higher. So we will gain power at the top end, but we will lose it at the bottom. What we always want to have is the smallest possible turbo that can make the desired horsepower. And why that is that we want not only to be making peak horsepower, we also want to have as much power as possible under the widest possible rev range. So a smaller turbo will spool up faster, but it will also be limiting power at the top end. The same thing happens the opposite way. Once you have a big turbo, it will flow a lot of air in the top end, which will make a lot of peak horsepower, but it will be difficult to get it spooled up, and that will make drivability bad. Okay, compressor increased diameter a little bit, and if we do the same to the turbine, we will be getting more power still. This is a good time to consider the different aspects of turbo sizing. So what this is all about is larger turbos flow more air, smaller turbos spool up better. once we start adjusting the compressor sizing, what that effectively does is we will increase the compressor wheel diameter, and we will together with it also increase the compressor housing to be able to house that bigger compressor wheel. And the turbine is the same for the hot side. The exhaust side of the turbocharger, we will go larger turbine wheel and larger turbine housing to go with it. But what is this third thing now? AR ratio is something that if you want to have the exact explanation, it is easier by looking at a picture. If you Google this, you will see the picture that explains what exactly this is. In gameplay terms, it's at a simple approach. We will simply say that the AR ratio, higher ones make you a bigger turbine housing, and smaller values make you a smaller turbine housing without affecting the turbine wheel. Now, one interesting thing about how this game works is the relation between these metrics, these parameters. Usually you are better off by running slightly larger compressors and slightly smaller turbines. Okay, you will notice how things work together once you start playing around with this. Just try a lot of different things and you will see what works best. And how you know how things are working best is by looking at the power and torque curves and the economy tab here. You will want to be making efficient power, so that's why you look at those metrics. But now the relation between turbine and AR ratio, this is something you can do a little trick here. Let's keep in mind we are now making 176 horsepower and the economy rating is 539. If we go a lot smaller turbine, but then we start bumping up the AR ratio to make the same exact peak power, we will notice that we will reach the same peak power with a noticeably better economy rating. So how the game works is usually beneficial for you to run a smaller turbine with a higher AR ratio. And you will also notice that usually bumping up the AR ratio and not the turbine sizing itself, it will give you a smoother transition from off boost to on boost, which is you look at the torque curve before the boost threshold RPM. Okay, so we are getting nearer to our goals here. So now then, we are still somewhat economical, but I am afraid we have to hurt the economy a little bit to be able to actually reach the kind of horsepower that we are wanting to make. Okay, a little bit more aggressive cam profile, and now we can see that the exhaust system is starting to restrict. So you always want to change one parameter at a time, and then you will, if you want to really optimize things, you will go yet again through all the different parameters again once you have changed one of them in any great degree. Okay, so the exhaust restriction is pretty big already. We can notice that simply one click towards a bigger diameter we will be gaining 4 horsepower. Okay, now then we can see if with the new setup we are still optimized in the ignition timing category, and indeed we are. Okay, and now then we will look again at the turbo sizing, and we are gaining power by going bigger compressor, and now we will see if we can, yeah, there is still room. You can't do an unlimited difference, the relation between turbine and AR. There is a limit that at which you will always also have to be increasing the turbine diameter. But now we can see that, okay, we are getting knock. One thing is, once you start altering the turbo sizing, once you go big enough that you will start flowing a lot more air, it may become so that you are actually knocking because the airflow has been going up so much, and that's why it may be useful to drop your boost pressure for the while you are adjusting your turbo sizing, so you will not be getting knock and you will see reliable readings about your settings. So once you reach a setting after which you will not no longer get benefits in the performance specs, we are not increasing power if we go bigger than this, so we will always pick the smallest value that gives the best power we have seen in this setting. Okay, and the same is for turbine, and then we see if we can do a little bit of improvement in the compressor category still, but we are losing threshold. So let's see where we are now once we reach the peak boost is here, 189. That's not so far away. Okay, this is a good point at which to consider some of the other decisions that we could be making. So one thing is the turbo setup, is we have the choice between journal bearing and ball bearing. And once we start playing with this is basically just something that we decide whether we use bearings with a little bit more friction, which are cheaper, or bearings that are less frictious but will be costing more money. So what this basically does is it just helps your turbo to spool a lot earlier. And you can definitely consider this, but we want to do we want to achieve the results purely by tuning stuff. The other thing we could do is we could also switch to water to air intercooling, and it is a little bit more efficient, which we can see that it immediately makes a little bit more horsepower once we switch to this, but it also allows us to run more boost pressure. Okay, so that's something that you can do, and it'll be relatively easy and you will be getting good results, but you will be paying for it because the system will be heavier and it will be a lot more expensive. Okay, so we are still a little bit away from the goals, so let's see what we have to do in order to achieve what we want to get. We will actually we noticed that we get pretty nice returns with more aggressive cam profiles here. Okay, so that's useful. After that we look at the turbo sizing yet again. We will see if we are making enough of a difference in the cam profile department to allow us to get more efficient flow with a bigger turbo, but unfortunately that is not the case. However, we can just ever so slightly increase boost because more aggressive cam timing also has more headroom for higher boost levels. Okay, so we are now only 5 horsepower off the goal that we set. One thing we could do is we could run a richer fuel mixture, or we could drop compression, and both of those things would allow us to run higher boost pressures. To keep the video short, we are simply going to be using one of these options, but once you really go into optimizing, you will try both options or a combination of them, and you will see which one of them will give you the best power to economy ratio. So what we do now is we drop compression a little bit, which will temporarily lower peak power output, but once we start running more boost, okay, we are making more horsepower, and now increasing the turbo sizing a little bit. Can we actually achieve the goal we had? Let's see. Now add boost. Still not quite there. Still not quite there. So then we can also see if there is still something to be had in the exhaust department, and we notice that it's not really that much. So I guess since we took the compression ratio approach, we will need to go one click lower still and increase boost pressure. Okay, now we will notice that we actually found a limit where this becomes less beneficial. So instead of going ever lower in the compression ratio and trying to run more and more boost, we will notice that it becomes clear we are getting less and less returns by doing so. So instead we will run a little bit more cam profile and then a little bit more turbo sizing. Okay, little bit bigger turbo. We are still that 1 tricky horsepower off the goal. Okay, so maybe if we can still play with the ignition timing a little bit. We don't want to be not economical, so we will see if the added boost will now net as the desired effect, which it did not. Which is kind of humorous in that we are actually fighting for the one last horsepower. So let's see, compression a little bit down, a little bit more boost. Still not there. You can see it gets tricky once you reach a certain level. So I guess the one reliable thing you can always do is bump up the cam profile. Unfortunately, it does hurt the economy tab, but at least now we are making the horsepower that we were wanting to make, and we have succeeded in our endeavor. Now, since we did see that by reducing the compression ratio further, we didn't get any real results by just adding more boost. By that we also know that playing around with the fuel mixture would not also have been very efficient, because why you do this is to allow more boost pressure, and it appears that with this 1980 turbo setup we have reached the boost limit at which we can still be relatively efficient. There is a limit. You can't go crazy on boost pressure, because the more boost you run, the more heat you will create, and there will be a limit where added boost will only make more heat, which is why we were getting knocked so easily when we started to try to achieve the power goal simply by adding more boost. Okay, so here we are. We have gone through all the different aspects of turbo tuning, and I hope it was useful and enjoyable for you. So thank you for watching, and hope you will join for the next video.